Hey, and welcome to Sports Business Insider. Yeah, I know we're on like a tad bit early. But I mean, no worries. We're here and we're live, and I'm Denzel Snipes, and this is Sean Russi himself, the sports agent himself, connoisseur. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, what's going on, man? Good to see you
Uh,
again, Denzel.
you too, man. In the business of bringing everybody the business aspect of sports and further educating the masses about how contracts work, how people get paid, deals, and such is a relatively new show. Thank you for rocking with us as we continue to grow the program. Before we get started, just want you all to know you can check us out on Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And then also real quick as we go through some of our fine shows. Sideline Sports Show, Tuesdays, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Sideline Sports Network. Check out last night's episode. We had former MLB pitcher Kip Gross on. Part of the 1990 World Series champion Cincinnati Reds. How about that? He came on there sharing his experiences. It was supposed to be kind of but a divided up show, but the conversation was so good, we just said, screw it. We're just going to let them rock. So we went on and had them on for the whole program. It was really great stuff. So please go and check that out. Also, Top Rope Talk, Mondays, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Myself, Billy Cruz. Every now and again, Rafael Esparza comes on there and gives us betting odds. Just this past Monday, we had the WWE King and Queen of the Ring prediction show, preview show. And on Monday is going to be the recap because the premium live event is this Saturday, of course. So definitely check that out. Also, we got Hawk Talk with my boys, Dave DeRocher and Legion of Boom's on Walt Thurman III. That's Tuesdays at 10:30 Eastern Standard Time on the Sideline Sports Network. And last but not least, the Gauntlet with myself, JJ, Dom, Tyler, JT. That's on Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Sideline Sports Network. Also on James Tatum 12 on YouTube and Denzel Snipes 13 on YouTube as well. So let's go ahead and get started with this program and wanted to actually touch light on the recent happenings, most notably Jared Goff and his brand new extension. So he just recently got extended. It was 4 years, I think 212 mil, 170 mil guaranteed. It was something like 39 million sign-on bonus, the most ever sign-on bonus in the history of the game. Um, Oh, I'm sorry. It actually was 73 mil, not 39, 73 mil. But it's 53 million a year is second behind Joe Burrow. So, Sean, give us the ins and outs of this contract, man. You know, it really, and this right here should highlight how much of a blessing guys like you are to sports when you're able to negotiate these kind of deals for these athletes and get them paid. You know, how it feels to be that young and be set for life, to have generational wealth and everything. Now, talking about a quarterback named Jared Goff, because he's no spring chicken. He's been to the Super Bowl. He's been to another NFC championship game as of late, and he finally got his bag and it was well deserved. So take us through his contract, what all that entails.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, the signing bonus is currently the largest in NFL history. Obviously we see that, broken all the time at this point, especially given the quarterback position. That just seems to be whoever the next guy up will now be the next guy to break, Goff 73.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a huge signing bonus compared to the overall size of the contract,
Right.
right? Only 212 million total contract, 73 million in signing bonus, leaves you roughly about 130, 135, and total guaranteed is 170.
Right.
Um, so there's only 42 million in there that's incentive laced. And I haven't delved too deep into how many of those are games played and passing yard type things,
If they make
or
the
passing
playoffs and stuff
touchdowns
like that,
if they
yeah.
make the playoff. Yeah. But for only 42 million of that contract to be incentive laced is a huge deal. But I think that's kind of what we're going to start seeing, is not these. Patrick Mahomes' 10-year deal, I think, is going to end up being an outlier as we move down the road here. I
He
think you're going
actually
to see more.
restructured that, am I correct?
Yeah, and and they're going to continue to restructure him because of the large number.
Yep.
And like we talked about a few weeks ago, that keeps his cap number down. That's why he's not number two or number one in the annual per year
Mm-hmm.
number like now Goff is. And we'll touch on that in a minute in terms of how his number will probably fluctuate over the years.
It keeps his cap number down, and it also leaves room. The more he restructures it, the more that they can sign players. I recall back in 2014, 2013, when Tony Romo got his $1 million deal. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
He
yeah,
actually ended up restructuring it so that they could, keep players. You kind of see that
yeah,
coming, just because he signed 10 years, 400 million. It's like, by the end of 10 years. And don't get me wrong, because one of the better contracts that happened in the last year was Otani's, because he actually layered that out, that seven
yeah,
hundred million out. You know,
yeah.
but but with Jared Goff, you said you said it was about 42 million that's incentive based, and then if you could take us through the rest of the contract, go ahead.
Yeah, and so right now, like we mentioned, his AP, his annual number is 53 per year. Only number two behind Joe Burrow. That number will probably, like I said, fluctuate as they restructure and he creates cap room by taking sign his bonus early in the off seasons. And we'll see the Lions stretch this out, and it being only a 4 year deal, they'll have the room, as we've talked about in past shows, to add void years, if they wanted to really extend it out. God forbid he played, undervalue. Um, but I think, like I said, with the guaranteed, the main thing that the Lions are now on the hook for, obviously, is that guaranteed money. God forbid he gets hurt, or if he's underperforming and they decide to make a move in the next 2 or 3 years. I don't see that happening. He's performed at a high level for a long time. Um, but they would then be on the hook for a lot of dead money, similar to what Denver just went through with Russell Wilson.
True.
I think that's why
82
you're also,
million out.
yeah, and I think that's also why you're seeing these shorter deals, though. That way, if there is an issue and they do have to eat some dead money, they're not going to eat it for 5, 6, 7 years. It's going to be a 2, 3 year type of deal, and you're going
Four
to be out
year,
from under it
exactly.
quickly.
Yeah.
And
Now,
then also from the
Mahomes.
from the
Oh,
player's
sorry. Go ahead.
perspective, for Goff, it gives him an opportunity at the end of his 4 years, maybe to sign another 1 or 2 year deal. At least another 1 year deal, but maybe another 2 year deal, a multi-year deal at the end of this, because he'll only be, I believe, 30, 31 at the end of this. I believe he's 26 right now.
Maybe, yeah.
Um, so he'll only be 30 at the end of this. So he's setting himself up for another contract.
Yes. Especially if he can manage to bring. Yes, he's actually 29. He's 29 years old. He'll still be a young man. You also figure he's a relatively healthy guy. Doesn't really have an injury history, you know. But you also got to think, if he brings a Lombardi, and people see it as hell freezing over. If he manages to bring a Lombardi to Motown, what's going to be the size of the next deal?
Correct. Yeah, and you, especially given the history of that franchise and how long they've been, waiting for the Super Bowl trophy, and just what Campbell's done with that franchise in terms of the turnaround. I think we all expect them to be at the end in the playoffs. The divisional and possibly the NFC Championship again. Do they get off over the hump this year? I don't know. I still think Philadelphia and San Francisco are probably the two top talented teams in the NFC. Um, but in terms of Goff, if he brings home the trophy, then you're looking at maybe you're looking at a 2 year, $100 million deal at the end of this 4 years.
That'd be
And to
crazy.
keep him right at that 50, 53 million, and APY, that he's carrying right now.
Yeah.
Um,
Or I
and then
mean,
with that, go
What
ahead.
about a deal? Because it could be another 4 year deal. What about a deal that ensures he retires a Lion?
Yeah, and then I think what you'd be looking at there, just in case they were worried about if he decides to retire earlier, if there was any injuries in this 4 years, I think what you'd be looking at there is maybe a smaller guarantee and some void years to extend the cap hit.
Okay. Okay. And so, with that being said, let's go on to our next one, and that is, who's next to get the bag? Dak Prescott, Purdy, someone else? Now, me, I think Purdy would be on the books, and he's got the leverage because, well, he almost won the Super Bowl, right? you know, you would think like, okay, after last season, he definitely is our franchise quarterback. He's our guy. But I also wanted to, and I'm glad you actually brought up Dak Prescott, because there's been word, and shout out to my guy JT. He actually thinks Dak's not a Cowboy after this year. But whether he, and let's get on Dak for a second. Whether he does it with Dallas or someone else, what size of contract do you think he could net?
I mean, so Dak right now is around 40 million in that APY range. So
Right.
obviously he's going to be looking for a raise on that. Now, so here's the difficult thing with Dak, right? He's been a great regular season quarterback. Playoffs, not so great. So how do you determine that maybe he gets more than Goff? Maybe he gets more than Goff annually, but in less years because of Dak's age. Um, you know, there's been reports that that he could get somewhere in the 60 to 70 million dollar range. Um, and Robert Griffin III has been quoted, and also an unknown agent has been quoted that the longer Dallas waits, Dak's price is going up every day, and every time another quarterback signs, that number is going to go up. So
It it may be a
If Tua or Trevor Lawrence were to jump this line, and all of a
mhm.
sudden their APY is 57, then Dak is potentially definitely going to 65, 70. But I could see it being on a shorter deal, 2 or 3 years, because given Dak is already 30.
He is, but also at the same time, sometimes these contracts are results based. Now, I noticed one question said, should Dak get more than Purdy? The easy answer is no. One man's been to the Super Bowl, the other only has two playoff wins. However, Jerry Jones has said that he has shown millions of times that he's willing to break the bank. I
Well,
just
and I
don't know
think
how much
what you
more.
saw with Goff is value to the franchise, value to the city, and I think that comes into play with Dak as well.
Yeah,
Especially given the struggles that the Cowboys had, at quarterback before Romo and after Aikman. I think that it's just one of those things where when you've held down that job for so long, that historic franchise, the Dallas Cowboys, that job,
right.
I think there's a lot of value in keeping his name there and making sure he retires a Cowboy. And I think that's why you could see Jones do what he usually does and overpay. And they may pay for
Yeah,
it later in terms of cap hit when Dak is retired or dead money or whatever the case may be. But again, value to the city, value to the franchise may overlook anything that Purdy or Goff maybe has done more recently.
yeah. It very well could, even though a lot of people will. I, that's why this is. And I'm not going to call it a sensitive topic or anything like that because had this been any other owner, a Robert Kraft, anybody, it may be different. But we've seen so many times, just like you said it, Jerry Jones overpay. You know, like he overpaid, like he gave Romo like 100 million, and I think he only had one playoff win. You know,
And he's also known for waiting until the last minute, which this is what he's doing with Dak again. I mean, Dak when he signed his current 4 year 160, that was kind of down to the wire, and people
it
thinking he
was.
might have gotten franchise tag again. Um, but I
Also,
think
keep in mind that at the time period he signed his deal, Dak pretty much paying them in the corner because they weren't going to pay anybody else. Well, Zeke already
correct.
got his 90 million, right? And
Yep.
so who else? So who else were they going to pay big money? Do I
Yep.
think Dak was really going to walk? No, but the Cowboys weren't going to take that chance. Just like Romo pinned him in the corner, Dak did the same thing. He took a page right out of Romo's book. You know,
No, and I
the,
think if you look at what the drop off would be if you lose Dak with the potential quarterback market next year. Now, I'm just again hypothetically as we do here. Kirk Cousins may be on the market again next year with what the Falcons did in the draft. Is Dallas comfortable shifting from Dak to Kirk? I mean, Kirk's got about
Mhm,
the same track record in the playoffs as Dak does.
that's
But again,
true.
you do lose that city value.
Yeah,
And
Now,
again, who else is going to possibly be out there where the drop off is not significant?
now, what about this scenario? Because it's Dak, and okay, I'm not going to call him old. Okay, I mean like he's 30, right?
Correct.
Still young for a
It's
quarterback.
that witching year for NFL players.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, let's face it, 27 is old for a running back. You know what I mean? It kind of
Yep.
goes by position. You know, but what about this scenario? What if they opt not to pay Dak because again they're going results based and CD Lamb gets that money? I'm not saying a $200 million deal, but he gets the big payday that folks thought Dak would get. But it's like, but Dak got his. We only had
So
one
I
playoff
think
win out of it.
you
You
know,
pay CD Lamb,
yeah, and especially CD has been, their guy. He obviously has, been Dak's go-to for the last couple of years, and he's gotten better each year. As a pro, he obviously based on, and especially with what potentially Ayuk is going to get here shortly. Who knows what CeeDee Lamb could then possibly get?
Yeah. It's not
And in
just. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, in that same breath, Dallas has this little sneaky guy they brought in there is hoping he pans out, and Trey Lance.
Yep.
Now, if Trey Lance all of a sudden has a good preseason, maybe Jerry goes, "Oh, let's wait.
Yeah.
Let's see what Dak does again this year. Let's
But
see if he
even
stays healthy again this year."
but even if Dak has a solid season and whatnot, and I mentioned CeeDee Lamb, right? This is why at this time period they have to be careful with how much money they pay Dak if they are going to retain him after this year. Because don't forget, you still got to pay Micah Parsons. You still eventually got to pay Trayvon Diggs.
hmm And that
Shoot,
this is
who's
where it becomes, that's why we just saw Buffalo go through this remodel, right? Because they had been paying the guys for so many years, and they eventually had to kind of shift the wide receiver room and remake the back end of their defense. And those were cap casualties. Stephon Diggs, big number. They had to move on. Gabe Davis, they couldn't match what the Jaguars, or didn't want to do what the Jaguars are going to do for Gabe Davis. And now you see a new wide receiver room in Buffalo that's a lot lower than last year's cap number wide receiver room in Buffalo.
that's true.
Um, and I think that's where the numbers game come into play. Again, it's Jerry Jones, so it's a different owner that's playing different number games than the other 31 teams. Um, it's just one of those things that I think, and like we mentioned, the longer he waits, if Tua jumps this line, if Trevor Lawrence jumps this line, how much will that cost?
Yeah, yeah. Now with that being said, because I also mentioned Trayvon Diggs, he does have to have a hell of a comeback this year and next season because he is coming off that torn ACL and he is a DB. Now, I don't foresee him like falling off or anything like that, but just saying he's already working against him because if you have an injury history, that does take into effect how much a team is willing to invest in you monetarily.
Yep, no, exactly. And again, I think with Dak being 30, maybe you see the 4-year deal, but I think maybe you see a lot less guaranteed than Goff. It's really going to be interesting to see where Dak's numbers land, and especially if they wait to the end of the year to get it done. And
Right.
that kind of leads us into the next guy in end of year results, Brock Purdy.
Yeah.
So 2 years now, we've known he's led the Niners to the NFC Championship. 1 year got hurt in the first quarter. The next year, he led them to the NFC title. Obviously, eventually falling to the Chiefs, like many others have done in the last 5 years. Um, but if Purdy leads the Niners back to even the NFC title game and they fall short of the Super Bowl, for that to be his 3-year run,
Yeah.
and at 24, and based on the new deals coming out, I think you're looking at Purdy's number being potentially either right in line or right underneath Dax, because I think you'll see Purdy do 4 or 5 years somewhere between 270 and 300 million, which would put him about 60 million annually, which right
Okay.
under Dax an anticipated deal.
Anticipated.
And
Yeah.
again, I don't think that's a slight on Purdy. I think that's years of playing in Dallas versus a 3-year resume to go off of, even though it's a very impressive 3-year resume if he takes them all the way to back to the NFC title game again. I think that's what you see with Purdy, but then Purdy's only 28, 29 at the end of that deal. He sets himself up for another huge deal, or maybe an extension in year 2 or 3 of this next deal that
Mhm.
he's going to sign, next offseason.
Yeah.
So Purdy's set up to make maybe as much money as Mahomes does in that 10-year original contract, but over 2 deals, because I think you'll see him sign the 4 or 5 year lengths. And then
Yeah.
at 28, 29, he signs another 4 or 5 year contract.
Right.
And again, that's all hoping that Purdy obviously does what he does for himself, did what he did the last couple of years. Now, obviously, the Niners they're always going to say it's the weapons that have made Purdy the quarterback, that he is. But the Niners have had other quarterbacks in there over the last couple of years. Trey Lance has been in there. Obviously, we all know Garoppolo was pretty successful as the Niners quarterback. Obviously, limited arm wise, given what part Purdy does compared to Garoppolo. But he won a lot of games. He took them to the Super Bowl. He took them to multiple NFC Championship games. Um, so, people are going to make that argument, but I think it's easy to see on film that Purdy is, head and shoulders above a guy like Jimmy G was. And as much as he's not, a runner like Jalen Hurts, he's a he picks his spots to run, and
Right.
I think that gives his career more longevity than a guy like Hurts and Lamar Jackson.
Hmm.
I think you can see Purdy play to 34 to 38 years old, somewhere in there, where Lamar Jackson's 27 now. Maybe by 30, 32, he's already, because of this, maybe the speed going away and, now being just a pocket guy, you may see Lamar out of the league by 35, where I think Purdy's game allows you to play the Brady
A little
years
longer,
where
yeah.
you get much, much older.
Yeah. It's kind of like Aaron Rodgers, because Rodgers is a runner, but he picks his spots when to run. And he's 40, and he's about to play his what 18th, 19th season
Yep.
in New York. So yeah,
No,
and
and that's I think you see the pocket passers last a long time, especially the elite guys, right? We're not talking about just every pocket passer, but the elite guys, Aaron Rodgers, obviously Brett Favre way back when, more recently Tom Brady, Drew
Mhm.
Brees. These guys have lasted years and years and years because of, obviously their mental fortitude for the game, and then just obviously their talent overall. Peyton
Yeah,
Manning, all those guys played late into their 30s, almost 40. Obviously
yeah.
Tom Brady 44. So
But
I think Purdy's game compares more to that in terms of longevity. I'm not saying
yeah,
he's going to put up Brady's stats over the next 15 years, but longevity wise, in terms of how his game plays, I could see him playing until he's very old, old for football.
yeah, yeah. And you know what? Maybe Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts isn't out of the league by 34. Even after the speed slows down, if they're still relatively healthy and that arm still works, so who's to say they don't just turn into a pocket passer, last a few more years? There's nothing
No,
wrong with
and
changing your
right,
game.
absolutely. I think the fear is with them, their injury risk is much higher. I don't know if you've seen Lamar. His new camp looks like he's slendered down a little bit. Obviously, I think that plays to his speed, but at the same time, what does that do when you take a really hard hit?
Yeah,
With a little less muscle on you. So it'll be interesting to see how he holds up this year with the change in his body.
it is. Yeah. He wasn't a really swole guy to begin with. And the same thing happened with Tua. Also, Tua just went through a weight loss,
Yep.
and I was like, he's not. He wasn't really. He didn't like look big. Like he was listed at 220, but he didn't look 220. Tua looked like
Yeah.
200 or like 190.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, these were like more leaner guys anyway. So I'm curious as to how that's going to work out. But before we
And
close out,
speaking of
oh, good.
Tua, I was going to say, we touched on this next group possibly being Trevor Lawrence, Tua. Those
Hmm.
guys are probably also in the 50 million range. But I think the most interesting one in terms of this current season, this possible off season that turns into something that people will cover is Jordan Love. His number right now is 13.5 million, well under his market value for how he played last year. The agent was not extremely clear in terms of if he would hold out when the actual camp starts. He is in voluntary workouts right now, but there was no clear answer to whether he would hold out when actual camp starts. So that will be interesting to keep an eye on. He's obviously due a little more money than what the Packers. Again, he took it because he was the backup at the time. Good for him. It worked out, and he's overplayed his value. Now we'll see how he plays his hand.
Right.
Bless you.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Well, so with that being said, we'll round out the program with a bit of a Harrison NIL update. Um, so it says here that he refused to fulfill the breach refused to fulfill duties, and looks like a fiasco going on with Fanatics. Care to touch on that real quick?
Yeah, this is an update from the show we did a couple weeks ago, just to keep everybody up to date on what's going on with this. Fanatics has come out and placed a lawsuit against Marvin Harrison Jr. They have said he's refused to fulfill the duties of a contract a binding term sheet that he signed May 16th, 2023, and that term sheet was, according to Fanatics, finalized within 48 hours. He
Okay.
was paid in August and October. He was supposed to do certain appearances, sign certain amounts of merchandise, et cetera, et cetera. He has failed to do so even after multiple attempts by Fanatics to ask him to fulfill his duties.
Oh wow.
Fanatics is also claiming that a larger competitor, or a large competitor for them, excuse me, not larger, a large competitor to them, has made Harrison an offer with all this going on. Uh, I don't know who that could possibly be. I don't want to, speculate too much. Off top of my head, I'm thinking Dick's Sporting Goods, but who knows?
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, it's not the NFLPA. The NFLPA doesn't single out players and make them individual offers. Everybody gets the same standard marketing agreement deal.
Right.
Um, and other card companies have started to reach out to him now. Harrison has been accused of using this as leverage to say, well, up my offer that I signed, and Fanatics is obviously not willing to meet those demands based on the term sheet they had signed last year at this time.
Okay.
They say they negotiated that term sheet with Marvin Harrison Sr. And then April 23rd, right before the draft 2024, Marvin Harrison Sr. requested a copy of the term sheet from Fanatics, and then upon receiving that term sheet, told Fanatics they no longer had an agreement.
Oh,
So there's a
okay.
lot of moving parts here. It's a bad look for Harrison Jr. to start off this way, at least in the media.
Yeah.
I think, especially, to have the father mentioned as the one who did this deal, and then to actually have the father mentioned as the one who tanked this deal 6 days before the draft, I think is a little eye opening. Um,
Ah.
I just based on the character that is Marvin Harrison, right? The guy,
Yeah.
we knew him in the league that gave back off the field. That's a little surprising that his stature, would go back on his word and not just maybe fulfill what would be maybe an extra 1 or 2 years, instead of trying to leverage an outside offer at the last minute. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Obviously, if he's breached contract, um, I don't know if any court can fulfill him or force him to fulfill his duties. Maybe as much so as just pay damages to Fanatics for what he has done for breach of contract.
You may have to pay those damages. I wonder how much do you think he's probably looking at getting or looking at paying?
Well, I know when we discussed this a couple weeks ago, it was rumored that it was about $1 million deal that he signed.
Mm-hmm.
If it, I could see the damages being in excess of that, just between court fees and everything else that he would have to pay by being, the loser of the case in the
Mm-hmm.
hypothetical nature. If he is found to have breached his contract, I believe the court would make him pay Fanatics court fees, make him pay $1 million plus a little bit in damages. I think you'd probably look at maybe $1.5 million to $1 million in settlement, if not more.
Mm-hmm.
This is unprecedented, right? Now we're starting to see NIL lawsuits all over the place. But this is the first of a big player to go from college to the NFL and then start his career by being involved in a lawsuit with a merchandiser.
Yeah. Before you even attend one practice, that's crazy. you
Yeah,
know.
and then
Well.
on the heels of that, just to touch real quick, and we'll touch on it more next week. We had the former quarterback that's now suing the University of Florida, Coach
Mm-hmm.
Bill Napier. This NIL thing is becoming a whole can of worms, a little Pandora's box on its own.
Oh
Penny
wow.
Hardaway was just recently quoted that some of his players make more than his assistant coaches. We'll
Mm-hmm.
touch more on that next week, but the NIL Pandora's box is officially wide open.
Oh wow. Interesting enough. Well, with that being said, we'll go ahead and close out this program. Thanks everybody for rocking with us. Everybody on Twitter and on YouTube, Facebook as well. You can always check out Sideline Sports on YouTube. Check us out on Facebook as well. Wrestling discussions on Facebook. Excuse me. And Sean, if you, let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, and you follow me on Instagram and on Twitter at Sean Russi underscore agent. And then you can follow us on Twitch and Twitter and all those good networks that Jay's mentioned.
All right. Wait. Well, thank everybody for tuning in. For Sean Russi, I am Denzel Snipes, and we will see you tomorrow for more Sports Business Insider.